First of all, welcome to the One Carbon World Carbon Footprint Grant Fund. This is a webinar explaining about the ways that you can journey towards net zero. So about the three pillars that we support, which are measuring, reducing and contribute. So we're going to find out a little bit more about that today as well. Well, the journey to net zero starts now. For our planet. I think it needed to start before, but we are all here where we are. And it only took about 10 years ago that all the governments in the world, through the Paris Accord, kind of finally agreed about what that next action is. So it's not too many years that we've had in the corporate, private and public sectors to understand what we should be doing and what our role is. So let's talk a little bit about One Carbon World, where we're a leading not-for-profit. And as a not-for-profit, we're also a United Nations Observer Organisation. What does that mean? Well, it means that we're recognised specialists in journeys to net zero, nature-based solutions, even food systems as extra specialist areas that we have. And we take part in opening and closing debates in the UN Summit, so we don't just attend, we also help to influence, affect policy. And above and beyond that, we actually verified the emissions for one of the recent COPs as well, and wrote the official sustainability report. So again, a great way to know if you've got events that you've got planning as well, that One Carbon World can help support those as well. But we also, above and beyond that, we have two areas to our organisation. On the one side, we support journeys to net zero. So whether it's embassies around the world, whether it's fashion brands in the high street, whether it's 30,000 farmers or supermarkets, or whether it's a small cycling cafe, above and beyond, we support small, medium, large organisations around the world. Everyone's eligible for a grant, so we really want to support everyone and be really as inclusive as we can. And we're in 55 countries around the world, so what a great way to be able to take part. Maybe you might be in one of those countries that we haven't supported yet. We'll be really, really appreciative if we can help support you in even more areas. Just as examples, some of the previous grant recipients that you have there. So whether it's a sporting organisation, whether it's Unicyclists International that we've verified the emissions, and where you've got the Tour de France going on there, whether it's a Bupa or a hospital organisation, or whether it's the King Charles official jam supplier. You've got a really good examples of some different organisations around the world. And we actually verify the emissions of over a billion roses a year, just as an example. What does that really mean? It means we support every sector in the world, because you have a lot of suppliers, or what we call scope 3 emissions, and that means those suppliers all come from different areas that's not just the same as what your organisation does. And so that's really important that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of approved calculations that we use, that over 200 governments around the world use as well. So how can the grant fund help your organisation? Well, it's really important that when we talked before about measure, reduce and contribute, you're going to find out a little bit more about that measure, reduce and contribute there as well. What's happening in the world, first of all? Well, at the moment, we've got too much carbon going into the atmosphere. That carbon's acting like a heating blanket, which is causing extreme weather patterns. And we've seen it, whether it's in Uruguay, we've had our worst drought in 70 years, whether it's too hot to go outside in certain days of the year, it's been in Australia, or whether it's really about flash floods that have been happening in Spain. I think we can all understand that there is some extreme weather patterns going on. So as a world, we're aiming to decarbonise, to send less carbon into the atmosphere, so using less fossil fuels. But that's not working alone. So we've got in our toolkit, we've got nature-based solutions which can help bring that carbon back down, so that carbon can get sucked into tree leaves, for instance, locked into the tree trunks and into the soil. So that's a an example of what's happening at the moment. And we're looking at limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. So we're recognising that we are going up. And it's even a harder challenge. When I was younger, there was 5 billion people in the world, and now we've got over 8 billion people. So we've got a growing population. We've got deforestation happening as well. And we're seeing that together, though, we need to really team up. We've got the same amount of carbon above our heads in Switzerland or Costa Rica as we have got in Uruguay, where I am here today. So that's a little bit more about the challenge that's out there. And so by measuring where we are, setting targets for reduction so that we can all do that in line with each other, and then looking at rebalancing those residual emissions that we're going to be talking about as well. Okay, so a solution really is a consultative approach. So understanding and having an experts to support you. So think of the grant as an extension to your team, but at a fraction of the cost because it's subsidised. Supporting data collection, so understanding where you are from measurements, which we're going to talk about. We do the heavy lifting through the grant fund with the calculations as well, and then supporting you to understand with a report, where are you? These are all steps that we're going to just be going through in a moment now as well. Okay, well, the first thing that an organisation should be doing is to measure where you are. So, like me after Christmas, I need to jump on the scales to see where I am and what I need to do next. The same for an organisation. We need to jump on those scales. Now, the minimum that many governments around the world are saying that you should be doing is you should be looking at your energy and fuel use, so commonly known as your Scope 1 and 2 emissions. That can be as simple as your kilowatt hours for maybe your gas and electric use, or any company-owned vehicles. Maybe you've got a fuel card, maybe you know how many kilometres or miles it's doing in a year. Those are some key examples of the minimum that organisations are doing. And in fact, lots of organisations, for instance in the UK with over 250 staff, are already having to report on that information to the government. So it's really good that you can start to see, I think a lot of other countries are following this. Lots of work going on in Europe in that area, for instance, as well. And is it starting to be going to smaller companies as well? So start to think about how would that impact you if it became mandatory to report. But we don't need to just report the minimum. We need to start looking at supplier emissions. Imagine we can look at the carbon footprint of almost everything. We do that through what we call a financial footprint analysis. And that financial footprint analysis is where we'll look at categories such as legal, like your law, how much you're spending on lawyers, maybe 5,000 a year, on accountants maybe 10,000 a year, maybe professional services 15,000 a year. And these are examples of different spends that you're going to be having with your suppliers. So when the NHS Digital contacted us and said, how do we look at all our suppliers? And they have lots and lots and lots of suppliers. We said, well, let's look at some categories and match those up. Now, for One Carbon World, I decided to do that myself last year. It took the best part of a day. And did I wish I hadn't done it? Yes, at the time, because I had other emails coming through. Was it really good that I did do it? Yes, we shone a spotlight on sustainability and seeing that I was using software that we subscribe into that we don't longer need for different projects, some subscriptions that we shouldn't have been continuing as well. So it was a great way of finance and sustainability working together as one team and actually saving the company money. And so what a great way to be able to understand your carbon footprint. We then take that financial spend and change it into a footprint. But of course, you might already know some stronger data, such as instead of the water bill spend that you have, you might know the actual litres of water. So we can take the calculations in two ways, and actually in litres and kilometres and kilowatts, and also in financial spend as well. So our team can help guide you along that process. But it's all about data. And as long as you know what you're spending really as an organisation, that's a fantastic way. But each year you might decide to do a little bit more measuring and kind of move on from that energy and fuel use. Or maybe you notice the word verify, and so maybe your organisation's already measuring. Maybe you've had to do that yourself and work it out and come from maybe from health and safety or from other areas, and you've been given additional responsibility. So what a great way to join One Carbon World, the grant fund, to get that additional support to verify where you are. You don't want to find out that you were missing lots of important categories or you've been working things out wrong. And very similar to having a finance team and an accountant, is very similar to having a measuring team in your organisation and having a verifier. So those are the two things that can happen if you're measuring already. That verification is a fantastic step to do to give you that assurance, especially with other stakeholders asking nowadays for what is your carbon footprint. And that's only the start of the journey. So understanding where you are is a really quick part of the process, that within 30 to 60 days of receiving your data, we can have that turned around into a report that will help you understand what happens, what's the carbon footprint of your organisation, but what happens if everyone had to go net zero tomorrow? What would the cost be for your organisation? So again, a great answer for your finance leadership team to understand where you are, or perhaps if you're a small business owner, what would that impact look like? Above and beyond that, we're also seeing now that setting targets for reduction is really, really important. So reducing those targets, reducing your carbon footprint is extremely, extremely important. But how should you reduce it? Well, in 2050, it's enshrined in law for many countries around the world, and that we need to get to net zero in 2050. In Scotland, it's where I'm from originally, is 2045, for example. So that means that we've got to be looking at reducing about 4% a year. So there's 25 years left to 2050. So 4% a year is what organisations are looking at as a minimum. The UN has mentioned 5% reduction year on year. But also governments are being tasked with 7.9% reduction year on year to keep in line with climate science. So ask the question, are you part of the problem or part of the solution? And I say that to everyone as a great way to start to think about what you should be doing about your particular carbon footprints as well. But also, what happens if your organisation's growing? How can you reduce your carbon footprint? Well, our experts through the Grant Fund can help support you to understand your matrix. That matrix is really a way of dividing by your clients, dividing by your students if you're a school, dividing by the amount of flowers that you're growing, as an example. So many examples that you can then say, well, what is our carbon footprint for that stem of flowers? And how do we then produce more so that we have the same carbon footprint, but we're doing more, being more productive? Of course, you still want to have absolute reduction on things like waste and other things that can really be in your control. But isn't it great to know that being more productive is what we're also looking at? The UN doesn't want everyone to down tools and stop what we're doing. In fact, the UN SDG goal of ending poverty is really, really important to everyone. So we need to do this hand in hand, and we need to transition into that net zero society together. You know, until we have electric planes and electric cargo ships, there's some areas that we have to look at together and have to look at how we can reduce that. So that gives you an idea about measuring, first of all, is a key step, setting targets. And One Carbon World, we stop short of coming out to your office to do an audit. We don't want to create a carbon footprint to measure yours after all, but what we do is we give you a fantastic list of recommendations. For instance, what's the most efficient way to be able to reduce the carbon footprint? Perhaps what's the cheapest way that you have? What's the one that's going to make the biggest difference but may cost some money as well? So these are ways that you can start to think about which ones can be done by your organisation. And dividing by the amount of staff means that, a bit like health and safety, you may have somebody that coordinates sustainability, but actually everyone's got a role to play. I think that's the real important message. Even your consumers, your stakeholders, your suppliers, everyone's got that role to play, haven't they? And so a great way to be able to generate that information, to be able to share that content and information with your stakeholders. But also contributors. So once we get down to our residual emissions, it's really important that we can actually rebalance emissions as well. Because we're never really going to get to zero. That's why we've called it net zero. Zero might mean that we're actually switching the lights out for office and handing back the keys, and we don't want to do that. So this is about rebalancing your emissions. So we're here in Uruguay, where lots of trees are being grown, or in Uganda as an example of the project that we're supporting, and we're seeing that that's sucking the carbon into, or sequestering the carbon into those trees. We can then measure how much carbon's being locked in there, and we can say, well, this organisation has 100 tonnes of emissions, because we've calculated how much it is through that first step. And we're looking at rebalancing those 100 tonnes of emissions so that you can be carbon neutral. And included in the grant is 100 tonnes of carbon credits. So as a not-for-profit, we're funded through putting any of our revenues back into the grant fund or into resourcing. But also we're supported by the international carbon credit community. We've had support from the European Commission, and also the UK Innovation Fund. So it's great that you can see that. And actually, interesting fact, the first carbon credits actually came from Costa Rica. So I know that we have some people here today attending from Costa Rica. So well done for kind of leading the way and understanding how can we rebalance where we are by actually measuring nature. What a fantastic kind of breakthrough that's really accelerating it. And to the point that Microsoft this quarter alone have invested over $14 billion in nature-based solutions around the world. So imagine what it'll be like if all companies in the world can start to take part. What a way of green financing without debting up the world as well can happen there. This is a fantastic roadmap to carbon neutrality. We rolled this out with the UN team in Bonn, in fact, and it's a great way for you to understand where you are on that net zero journey. So there's three elements. We've mentioned measure, reduce and contribute already as the three kind of pillars that an organisation should look at. And the first part is to measure. Well, it's great, you're going to be getting a bronze, silver or a gold in each of these areas. And we're not expecting everyone to get to gold straight away. There has been a few impressive organisations that have achieved that. But actually it's a great way to say, well, where are we now and what do we need to do next to get to silver, as an example. So first of all, by measuring your carbon footprint, this is your own emissions. So your energy and fuel use as an example, you're going to be able to achieve a bronze certification. So you're going to get the Carbon Neutral International Standard Bronze Award for measuring. If you're starting to measure some of your suppliers, like the water company I mentioned before, you can move to silver, which is starting to look at the impact from your value chain. Or if you're measuring everything and everything in the sense that you're looking at all your suppliers' spend, then you can achieve gold. So that's something that the grant supports you with through experts as well. And you can decide as an organisation, well, maybe we aim for silver this year, maybe we spend a bit more time understanding what we need to collect for gold and achieve gold next year. Or maybe you want to just jump straight in there and say, I'd like to know where it is. If it took one carbon weld the best part of a day, maybe we can look at that with our team to do it. If it took the CEO one day to look at those financial spends that they have from Sage or Xero or other accountancy software, it can be really quite achievable that way. and put them into categories so that you can really narrow it down very quickly. So we talked about setting those targets. Well, most of the world needs to be net zero by 2050, so it makes sense to sign up to that, and it's enshrined in law, so it makes sense to have that as an overarching target, and that would give you bronze. But having a bit of a plan on how to get there, whether we give you recommendations, so adopting some of those recommendations, coming up with some of your own, listening to your own staff that are going to have ideas as well, will give you a silver. But also, if you set targets and achieve them, so if I wanted to diet by 5 kilograms and I weighed myself and I did achieve that, then that's equivalent to having gold. So if you set yourself a target each year about what you're reducing by and you actually achieve that, then that's gold. So that kind of shows you where you can really move on to. So you might say, well, maybe gold's achievable this year for measuring, silver maybe for reduce, because we need to come back and actually achieve our targets. And then for contribute, well, we give 100 tonnes of carbon credits as part of the grant to each organisation taking part. So that means that you're going to actually have a bronze no matter what. For some organisations where your carbon footprint is lower, you're going to be able to achieve silver relatively easily, or even gold, because you might be under 100 tonnes that we give you. And for other organisations that are larger, we can support you by you can purchase additional carbon credits, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly, at 50% off the usual price of carbon credits as well, so subsidised through that grant fund. So the reports that you receive are going to make sure that they're the Greenhouse Gas Protocol corporate standard compliant, past 2060 compliant, ISO compliant as well, 14064 is compatible with, as an example. So we really built this report that's not just an inventory, that really understands where you are, what targets did you have in there, what's your matrices of your growing as an organisation, dividing by the turnover, dividing by how much you make of different products, as an example. It's a great way of understanding where you are. And then also having those recommendations for reduction, understanding what is that cost of carbon neutrality as of today, so that sustainability can be seen as a saving to an organisation, not a cost which it's often perceived as. You know, what happens tomorrow if the world goes to net zero? What does that really look like for the cost to your organisation? Well, you're going to be finding that out. And of course, the carbon credits are Kyoto Protocol and Paris Accord compliant, from UN projects or from nature-based solution projects. So let's find out about that just now, actually. Well, so we've talked that we have different projects available. So we have UN clean energy projects called United Nations Clean Development Mechanism, overseen by the United Nations, with the governments of each country that are taking part involved, as well as those communities or project owners as well. So they can be clean energy projects through energy such as solar, wind and hydro, or they could also be from catalysts such as stopping some gases going into the ozone. So lots of different projects that are out there as well that we support, and they're only in developing countries. So what a great way to support those countries that are probably have less resilience to being able to support themselves should extreme weather patterns happen. They might be more reliant on nature, on farming as well, rather than perhaps some industrialized countries as well. So again, really important to start to think about that impact and doing the right thing. Let's have that double win of supporting other communities as well. But also we support afforestation projects. Well, afforestation projects are absolutely critical. So we look at projects that have got degraded land that perhaps even cattle or communities can't even use. and then changing that land over into afforestation, where we're bringing back uncommon species, allowing communities to take part in healthcare and dentistry, but also guaranteeing fair wages with extra certifications from the FSC, the Forestry Stewardship Council. But thinking about fire breaks as well. Is there an insurance in the project if there's a fire that it'll be replanted, or as an insurance that's been paid into so you're not uncarbon neutral for what you've done? So those are really, really important things, that we don't have a massive portfolio that we don't know and act as a broker that's taken a share that way. We're actually supporting these projects with these communities direct. So it means that there's a great opportunity to spend a lot of time making sure the right things are happening. And we can also see that the SDG goals are extremely important in there as well, that we're looking about those co-benefits, that co-creation benefits. You know, somebody said to me recently, at net zero, we've got to do it in any case. Let's just do it the best way we possibly can by supporting communities and getting that additional value while we're doing it. And I really, truly believe that that's a great, fantastic way to support our planet as well, a 2-for-1, shall we say. So, coming into the grant fund now, talking a little bit about what it is and what it does here again. Your grant fund is suitable for companies with up to 250 employees, so whether that's public or private sector or foundations or charities, anyone in the world can apply. Or for larger companies with over 250 staff, there's a slightly higher contribution fee that you would have there as well. So what do you get really? So if you're a smaller company with under 250 staff, your annual contribution would be £3,000. That covers dedicated experts to support you, to measure your carbon footprint, to set reduction targets together, to give ideas of what that could look like, to look at recommendations for reduction and matrices as well, but also achieving the carbon neutral international standards. So you'll get that bronze, silver, gold recognition as well to demonstrate where you are. You also get full use of the One Carbon World logos and support with comms. So imagine your comms team, fantastic with your brand, but is it that you're net zero? Is it that you're carbon positive? Is it you're climate negative? Which way should you be saying different things? So we can sign those off as well for you, and especially protecting your brand, but aligning it to showing that you have lots of great things in place that you can say to your stakeholders. Well, not only do we measure our footprint, we've got targets in line with science, we've got a reduction plan in place, we understand where we are, and we're also rebalancing some of those emissions already. All those things that we're doing without you having asked us for that information yet. That absolutely can generate economic prosperity as well, especially with lots of larger organisations really starting to look at their suppliers, and you might be feeding into that approach. So your contribution would only be, instead of £6,000, would be £3,000. Next year, you can renew again at that same price, and that's in your grant agreement as well. Or you might say no more, because you understand exactly what's involved now, and you can build your own capability and capacity, and that's absolutely fantastic as well. And it's the same grant offer letter that embassies around the world are signing, governments that we're working with, all the way through to sporting events such as World Surf League, through to World Sailing, through to other Olympic committees, exactly the same ones that we're having. Or for organisations that are larger, perhaps got more offices, perhaps got a bit more support required to understand where they are. Instead of £10,000 to go through that support process, it's only £5,000. So, less than the price perhaps of an intern to join your organisation. You're able to get an extended team that can really support you, not just as a one-off, but right through that annual approach that you need to look at. And of course, renewing there as well for you as an organisation. I'd like to thank everyone for going through this first part of the process, which is understanding more about One Carbon World and the grant fund.